Dr. Lawrence Lowe is a medical health officer with the Fraser Health Authority. Joins us here in Studio 10. On the line is Advocate Paddy Treavor, who writes the Van East Beer blog and is the former president of the Vancouver chapter of the Campaign for Real Ale. Good morning to you both.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Good morning.
Dr. Long, let me start with you. This week the government announced it will explore how to sell alcohol in grocery stores in BC. You heard that. The response has been overwhelming from the public. About 80% want it sold in grocery stores. Do you think it's time for that changed?
I think it's an interesting policy thing to start studying. I think we need to be very careful when it comes to alcohol policy, though. As we know, the vast majority of evidence suggests that increasing availability of alcohol has led on a societal level to greater alcohol-related harms, injuries, all those sort of other things.
Is that the case though in Quebec, where you've been able to buy wine and beer in grocery stores for many years, and in parts of the United States?
Yeah, I think those people who sort of look at other jurisdictions or other places sort of forget that the availability is only one part of it. I think the drinking culture that exists in different parts of Quebec as well as abroad is slightly different from that we see here in Canada and in many other parts of the United States, and specifically the United States is very heterogeneous in terms of its different policy regimes in different states.
Paddy Treavor, what do you think? Is it time to sell alcohol in grocery stores?
I believe it is. I think many of the people interviewed in the segment just before you had us on have kind of hit it on the head. And as the doctor has as well, it's the attitude here. But that attitude, a lot of it has been created by this sort of alarmist, prohibitionist attitude towards alcohol. I agree that there needs to be more education, but the majority of people enjoy a drink without having any issue with it. Let's be frank about that.
Paddy, you met with John Yap, who is the Parliamentary Secretary for Liquor Policy Reform. What did you tell him needs to change about our liquor laws?
We personally, with CAMER, our proposal did not address this particular issue, but we were looking at more availability with alcohol, more access to it in a responsible manner. Campaign for Real Ale does advocate responsible drinking. It's a big part of our mandate. We were looking at such things as allowing minors into liquor primaries during the day under very controlled circumstances if the licensees so desire, opening up beer gardens so they're more family-oriented and less of the frat party that they are now, having beer and wine sold at farmers markets. Those are some of the things that we looked at which would increase accessibility to alcohol for consumers.
Dr. Lowe, you've asked the government to make a public health approach to alcohol a priority. Why?
I think the main reason is that alcohol is one of the chief substances out there that are responsible for injuries, mental health issues, and chronic diseases that we are seeing. And even in Fraser, where I work, we have the lowest rates of consumption of alcohol in the province of British Columbia, but we still have the highest rates of alcohol-related hospitalizations and the second highest rates of alcohol-related deaths. While we agree that the vast majority of British Columbians enjoy alcohol responsibly, I think we need to also understand that culture is not something that's going to change overnight. And if we go ahead and do this, at these levels, what are we going to see in terms of trends with regards to those injuries and hospitalizations?
But what evidence do you have that more liberal, and I say that with a small L, more liberal liquor laws lead to more social and health problems?
Well, there's a large body of evidence. For example, there's actually been a systematic review that once looked at basically a review of evidence that looked at Sunday bans in different jurisdictions, and they actually found that lifting Sunday bans in previous jurisdictions where they had them, you couldn't sell alcohol on Sundays, led to things like increased rates of driving while impaired, increased rates of domestic violence calls, all sorts of other stuff. So even just that evidence from different states in the United States and Australia show that lifting a Sunday bans led to more harms.
Paddy, what's your response to Dr. Lowe's concerns here?
Well, first of all, I'd like to address one of the things he just said. I'm actually a registered psychiatric nurse and I've worked in many emergency wards in Vancouver and worked in the downtown east side. He said alcohol, one of the things is responsible for mental health issues is alcohol. I take issue with that. Alcoholism is a very complicated and complex issue that involves socioeconomic, societal problems, cultural problems. just creating a situation where alcohol is less accessible and more expensive is not going to stop those issues. There are other things that are contributing to it. It's an oversimplification of the issue. And I think that's one of the things I'd like to look at with this, is it is a very complex thing. And just by creating a state where it is harder to get and more expensive is not going to solve alcoholism.
Dr. Lowe?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, we do recognize that the vast majority of British Columbians look at things responsibly. I think Secretary Yap has a very challenging policy report to come up with. I think we just ask that any policy change take health and public safety paramount in account of the fact that we still have all these considerations.
So, Paddy, given your experience both as a beer aficionado and as a registered psychiatric nurse, how do you think the government should strike a balance in between public health, safety, yet more choice for consumers?
I think the laws are in place already. That's part of the reason this review's come up, is people feel like they're over-regulated with alcohol. And if you put it in place, structure it properly, where you have those checks and balances the doctor's referring to, if somebody's abusing it, selling to minors, selling to drunks, over-serving in a bar, over-serving in a restaurant, allowing minors into their licensed establishment, hammer them with the full strength of the law. We agree with that, the Campaign for Real Ale. We think responsible drinking needs to be paramount in society. We agree with that. But we don't think that by creating this atmosphere where it's less accessible, more expensive, that is solving obviously it's not solving the issue. Look where we are right now. We're one of the most expensive jurisdictions in Canada for alcohol. The doctor's quoting these numbers about the problems related to it. And again, I think that drawing a direct correlation between alcohol consumption and people going to the emergency and having problems, that we have to be careful with that. I'd like to do a study about how many people do have a drink of alcohol and don't end up in the hospital. And we'll look at the real numbers as to the percentage. We need to address the root problem.
It's a very interesting debate. I want to thank you both for taking part in it this morning.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Lawrence Lowe, Medical Health Officer with the Fraser Health Authority, and Paddy Treavor, who writes the Van East Beer blog and is the former president of the Vancouver chapter of the Campaign for Real Ale.